Great. Welcome to this lesson on leave no trace principles. This is mostly a note, and so I'm going to kind of explain this before I begin. And so, if you think about wilderness camping, if you went back into the 1920s or 1930s and you told someone, you wanted to go into the woods to go camping, they'd probably think you were nuts because the world was kind of migrating from more of a wilderness lifestyle to living in a more suburban or city-like lifestyle where they had more amenities and people were getting things like flush toilets and running water and all those kind of things. But by the 1950s and 60s, people, for the most part, had all of these things. These amenities existed everywhere. And then all of a sudden, people wanted to go back to nature. They wanted to kind of get closer to nature and see what was out there. And so what happened was people started going back into the wilderness, and it didn't take long. Probably by the 1980s or 90s, we started seeing a lot of garbage start to build up and the destruction of habitat and wilderness areas. And so a group of people came together and said, look, we need to make some basic rules for wilderness camping and encourage people to follow these rules. And they even had courses on this and whatnot to teach people how to properly wilderness camp without destroying the environment. And so they came up with a series of principles. I believe there's 7 of them. And these 7 principles are taught in a weekend course if you want to go and be part of a course like that. You can look it up online. I'm not sure if very many people are doing them anymore, but the principles are fairly well known and often posted on posters in areas where you go into wilderness to remind people to be respectful of the environment and the other people who are using the area. So the principles follow the following 7 basic guidelines. And so I'm going to go over them quickly in the note, and then you can answer some questions as we go along. So first of all, planning ahead and being prepared is number 1. And this is really probably the most crucial because as soon as people are not prepared and they haven't really planned ahead, they get into a survival mode. And when you get into a survival mode, you will just do whatever you have to do to survive, and that means destroy the environment around you because your life is more important than maybe cutting down a tree or two to make a shelter or whatever's necessary. But if you're well prepared and you've planned ahead, you don't find yourself running into these problems, okay? So poorly prepared people present unexpected situations, often resort to high-impact solutions that degrade the woods and put themselves at risk. Proper planning leads to less impact, and that's real simple. So there are some things that go with that, like knowing the regulations. And a good example is there are no cans permitted in Algonquin Park, and that's because by the 1980s, every single reasonable campsite had hundreds of empty cans lying around on them because people would bring cans, cook their meal over the fire. The old soup can or stew can would sit there and they just leave it behind. And once one person did it, another did it, another did it. Next thing you know, you literally had hundreds of these cans, and park rangers didn't have time to go cleaning them up. So they simply made a rule. We'll fine you if you bring a can in. No cans permitted. The truth of the matter is if you don't leave any behind, nobody's going to bother you, but I rarely see people bring cans into the park anymore. Another thing is to repack your food to minimize waste. Don't bring things that are full of wasteful ways. A good example is just something as simple as cookies. If you open a cookie container, the box comes with a plastic bag inside that has a plastic container that holds the cookies. All that stuff is not necessary, so we often will take them apart and put them into one Ziploc baggie, which is much lighter, easier, and simpler to carry, packs better, all kinds of other things. Split large groups into smaller groups, and we do that ourselves. We tend to go in groups of about 10. If we have 40 people, we break into 4 groups of 10. If we had, say, for example, 27, we do 3 groups of 9 and those kind of things. Be prepared for the weather. If you're not prepared for the weather, what tends to happen is that you are going to utilize resources that you might not have to do. So if you don't have a proper clothing or shelter when you're out there, you often will destroy whatever you have in nature available to you so that you can, in fact, survive, because your survival is more important. Okay, so those are some of the basics for planning ahead and being prepared. And then the next one is travel and camp on durable surfaces. Okay, so what they want you to do is stay off of areas that are more sensitive, and some of these areas are not really fun to travel on anyway. So basically, if I could sum this one up, it is stay on the defined or clearly marked trails. Don't go making your own trails. Don't go bushwhacking and cutting trees and branches down. Try to stick to the existing trails that are there. Walk single file on trails that make sense, right? And don't be respectful of the land around you, and understand that other people are going to come there and use these areas as well. Okay. They really don't want you out there making your own trails and doing your own thing, especially in areas where there's a fair bit of usage from people in the wilderness, right? We got to try to respect what's there so that others don't destroy it, and leave it there for the next generation as well. Okay, so that was the second one, travel and camp on durable surfaces, which really means stay on the trail. And dispose of waste properly. And this is always a very debatable thing. What's the proper way to dispose of my waste? Most trash and litter should be carried out. So you pack it in, you pack it out. Okay. I do burn a fair bit of my waste, but I do try to keep my plastic burning to a minimum, although I have shown to many people that actually burning, a plastic baggie is really more harmful than burning a piece of wood. Most of the plastic baggie is made out of ethanol, and it's okay. I'm not against it, but burning excessive amounts of plastic is an issue. So try not to do that, right? So we pack it in. We're going to try to pack it out. Dispose of human waste in an appropriate manner. In other words, I will do a lesson on how to crap in the woods. Obviously, peeing in the woods also has some implications. We don't want to pee in lakes and rivers and streams, that we actually have to drink that water. And the other thing that is more significant too is disposing of soap and away from lakes and streams whenever possible. Like, let's not dump our soapy water in them. Even the biodegradable soaps should not be put into the lakes and streams. They're harmful to the organisms that live there. And when we throw those ecosystems off, things aren't going to be the same for future generations and for us if we come back in the future. So it's best to try to avoid the use of that. I more and more just don't even waste my time with soap. I just use a scrubbing cloth and scrub my dishes off, and only use soap when things are like really greasy and I can't get them cleaned off otherwise. Okay. Leave what you find. Okay, so leave no trace directs people to leave the things that they find behind. Okay, if everybody wants to take a shell from the beach, then eventually there are no shells left on the beach, right? If everybody's trying to take a fossil, eventually we run out of fossils. Okay, so they also ask you not to do things like digging trenches around your tent areas to, alter the campsites. Try not to hammer nails into trees. And you're going to see this in Algonquin. There's lots of places where people have hammered nails into trees. And I'm going to be honest, sometimes it's pretty useful. I have never done it myself, but I do take advantage of those that are there. Avoid clearing rocks or twigs or removing items. And even in some places, people have brought in chainsaws in Algonquin, and they've actually made little kitchen areas and stuff. And it's quite useful when you're out there, but it sort of takes away from the real primitive nature of what we're trying to do. So they really discourage people from doing that. Preserve the past. So take some pictures, not possessions. Leave rocks, plants, and other natural objects you find, and don't build structures or furniture. Those kind of things are part of the 7 principles here that we're talking about. Minimize campfire impacts, and this is always a tough one for the young men in my course, is that, they want to build, they get this idea that they want to build the biggest campfire that anybody's ever seen, and there's really no reason to do it other than it's just fun to do. And They really discourage this. First of all, a lot of these places run low on campfire wood as the season goes on. So if we're there in June or July when there's lots of wood around, there isn't very much in September. And so we don't need to just wastefully burn wood. And the other is it has a greater risk of causing forest fires. We could cause a forest fire as a result of it. So that we really encourage low impact. Keep your fires small for cooking. If you need a fire for warmth, that's one thing. I'm okay with building a bigger fire because you have to have fire for warmth. But making a fire that has flames that shoot up 10 feet is really not appropriate. And keep in mind that you put your tents and other items at risk. Tents and tarps are made out of very, very soft nylon material, and sparks and pieces of wood that fly off the campfire or float up in the air can burn holes in them very easily. So we really don't want to do that. Try to burn your fires, though, if you do, right to ashes. I'm really I like to try to get my fires burnt down to the best I can. And then, using a lightweight camp stove or overcooking on the fire is better. And we do a bit of both. We use actually a stove that burns, but very little pine cones and small twigs and branches. And it really works excellent. It's called a little bug stove. And then we also have a isobutane stove for cooking where we need to be able to control the temperature more. Okay. So minimizing campfires is really important. Let's not do it when we don't need to. And I actually know people who never have a campfire. I hate that. I need a campfire. I want one. But some people just almost never have campfires when they're out there, which is almost crazy to me. But yeah, it is the way it is sometimes. Okay. Respect wildlife. This is a key thing. We need to be very careful and respectful of the fact that we are, in fact, invading their territory, not them in ours. So don't feed them. Anytime you feed wildlife, you're encouraging them to come to us and not us go encouraging them to be around humans, and then they're going to keep coming back, the next camper and the next camper. So even the little chipmunks really shouldn't feed them. I'm probably guilty of doing that from time to time, trying to get them to come right up onto my hand and eat off my hand or something like that. It's kind of cool, but we should really not do that, as we're encouraging those animals to come back and become dependent on us, okay? Observe wildlife from a distance, so try not to get too close. Sometimes you get to be able to see a moose and Algonquin and you can paddle up to them and get fairly close, but be careful. They are one big animal and they can be unpredictable. You never know, especially in the fall. A bull moose can all of a sudden charge, and trust me, they could probably be more deadly than a bear in many ways. Those antlers could be pretty nasty. That rack is a big item, and they're very powerful. Protect your food and waste from wildlife by using proper storage is important. So we carry pails along that are sealable so that animals cannot get in them. We put our waste in there, waste food, and any other waste we put in there as well. Okay. If you bring a pet, make sure you have control of your pet, and it's not going to run and chase animals. The real big issue with chasing deer if you have a dog, so avoid that. And then avoid wildlife at sensitive times. So be aware of when animals might be in a mating season, and be considerate of that. Definitely the moose in the fall when they're in the rut. You want to stay away from those bull moose. They could be dangerous to you and others. Okay. All right, and the last thing is be considerate of other people. Remember, you are not alone in the wilderness, okay? There are other people that are enjoying this, and they would like to be able to enjoy this process or place just as much as others. So make sure, if you're passing someone on the trail, you say hello, step off the side of the trail, be considerate. Usually groups are really good that way. I never really had a problem. And be respectful, like even little things like, when you're at portages, keep your stuff together. Don't spread things all over the place. So if another group comes, they don't have a place to set something down. Those are little things you can keep in mind. And then the other things are sounds. At night when you're at camp, like in Algonquin, it is against the law to play music on a speaker. You can have headphones in your ears, but you're not allowed to play a speaker of any kind. They don't want that in Algonquin. So they put those rules in place because people come there to get away from those kind of things, not to be absorbed by it. So they don't want some guy with a big, huge stereo system blasting his music, and you'd be shocked at how well it carries across the water. Many times I've been camping in Algonquin, didn't know anybody was near me, and then all of a sudden, late in the evening, the wind dies down, and I can hear them talking or laughing or joking across the water. Not that they're being excessively loud, but you can all of a sudden hear them because the sound just carries right across the water very, very quickly. So avoid, making a lot of loud music and sounds if you can. Obviously, if you got to chop some firewood, you're going to do that. Those are sounds of nature, in my opinion, but we want to avoid, a lot of other things, yelling and screaming and hollering and those kind of things. People do come to these areas for that reason. So those are the 7 principles of leave no trace camping, and they're good principles to guide ourselves by and help us to be better stewards of the land and the places we're going, so that everybody can enjoy them. Hope you enjoyed that lesson. Take the time to answer the questions if you have them, and we'll see you the next time.